We are very likely to believe something when it's emotional or when it's sort of visual, and then we're very likely to share it. So whereas AI outputs have been unreliable, and we've kind of known this for a while now, we're now dealing with a whole other level of unreliability that has consequences for us as citizens of a democracy, as people who work in schools, as people who care first and foremost about child safety before anything else. We just really have to grapple with this at a couple different levels.
Hello, and welcome to The Perch, where we highlight authentic voices, expert insights, and meaningful conversation. The Perch brings the Kincaid School's mission to life through stories of education, leadership, and community. Let's get started. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Mike Murray, and today we're taking a deep dive into a topic that is both fluid and concerning in the world of education, and that is artificial intelligence, or AI. AI continues to develop throughout almost every aspect of our life, every industry, and educational institutions like the Kincaid School are grappling with how and when to adapt AI into our students' educational journey. Happy to say we have Mr. Vinny Vrotny, the Kincaid School's Director of Innovation and Technology, with us today. Vinny, welcome to the Perch.
Thank you, Mike.
We are also joined today by Mr. Evan Harris, who's the president of the Pathos Consulting Group. Evan brings a wealth of experience to the conversation today, particularly in some of the darker areas of AI technology, where it's being used for illegal purposes such as data scams and deepfake image and video content. Evan, that being said, we're glad to have you on the Perch. Welcome.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
So, Vinny, let's start maybe with a high-level overview of what you and our other colleagues here at Kincaid have established over the past 4, 5, 6 years, really, to help safely integrate some of these AI technologies into the enhancement of both learning, but also teaching here at Kincaid.
So, over the past 4 years, our work at Kincaid has centered on treating AI as a new form of literacy. With the release of AI tools such as ChatGPT, we began to focus and build a set of human-centered frameworks grounded within Kincaid's mission. That means clear guardrails rather than blanket bans, strong faculty learning so that the adults can model that responsible use, and an ongoing conversation about ethics, data, privacy, and trust. And we've established a culture where AI is something that students are taught to question, use, and not just blindly adopt.
So, Vinny, that is a lot of data to digest. I want to ask you, if I can, just a follow-up on AI within, you talked about within the framework of culture and the mission at the Kincaid School. Is there one piece of what you just introduced us to that really speaks specifically to Kincaid's mission or its core values, where you think your guidance and our use of AI really comes to light?
I think there are two examples. The first of which is once ChatGPT became public, one of the things that we focused on developing first was a set of guiding principles around our use of AI. And the human-centered approach was really important. Other schools that were adopting AI were talking about policy at the first, rather than talking about the principles which then inform that particular policy. The second summer, we really focused in on what has been used as a model with many other schools, our generative AI acceptable use menu. And again, this defines how AI can be used within an assignment or how it can be used within the various different tasks that a student is trying to accomplish, whether it's reading and comprehension, content creation, or problem solving. So they fits within everything that we've really been focusing in on in the classroom from a pedagogical concern.
That's perfect. I think of the core value at Kincaid of honesty. And I know when these conversations started with ChatGPT and others, that was definitely a struggle in school systems. Evan, let's pivot over to you for a minute. You've worked with Kincaid a little while, and you certainly work with other schools Um, the idea of principle versus policy, how have you seen maybe some other schools approach that development of policy, um, versus principle, or even just have the conversation on how are we going to use these tools and how are we not?
Sure. So, I think because so much of my work revolves around deepfakes in particular, that tends to be my focus. And I will echo what Vinny said, which is that I think most schools tend to go kind of policy first. But what Kincaid has done and what Vinny is describing with regard to kind of an ethics first approach, critical thinking, honesty, all of these things put Kincaid in a uniquely strong position to grapple with some of these new challenges, which are not unique to Kincaid. Every school is now grappling with the sort of emergence of deepfakes. But I think because of all of the work that this team has already done, like the kind of the core competencies, the foundation has already been laid. I think for Kincaid to do what it has been doing for years now, which is to set an example not only nationally but internationally. Schools are, I think, going to look to Kincaid on this issue. So it's really exciting to work with this school in particular.
That's great. Thanks for that insight. So, Vinny, when we started, you mentioned a couple things. I'll call it some AI language that it has taken me and a lot of us quite a while to figure out what that means. And I think there's two things that jumped out. One was hallucinations
Mhm.
that I believe people are learning more about. And one other troublesome thing is also the bias that can be in the results, both in text, but also in visual results from AI. Um, Evan, does that bring anything to mind in the work that you've been doing?
Sure. So, I mean, when I think about deep fakes within the context of sort of misinformation, the human brain, I mean, it is really adding fuel to a fire of misinformation that we've seen online for years now. Because the fact is that when something is extremely emotive or it triggers our preconceived notions, confirms our biases, we are very quick to believe it. And there is frankly nothing in human history that has prepared us for a whole new sort of type of media, which is going to have to be that we're like questioning what we see with our very own eyes or what we hear with our very own ears. We are not prepared for that. We are very likely to believe something when it's emotional or when it's sort of visual, and then we're very likely to share it. So whereas AI outputs have been unreliable, and we've kind of known this for a while now, we're now dealing with a whole other level of unreliability that has consequences for us as citizens of a democracy, as people who work in schools, as people who care first and foremost about child safety before anything else. We just really have to grapple with this at a couple different levels.
When we think about some of the images and social media videos that are thrown out there that we just consume at a massive rate, the authenticity of those images is certainly, as you talk about, very questionable. And I would call it pretty deeply concerning that in some cases, that authenticity really isn't challenged. This is an image, it looks pretty close, but if you examine it a little closer,
Mm.
you're going to find that there's something wrong with the image, but it's being represented as fact. Is that what you've seen, Vinny, as well?
AI is really built upon a collection of data sets, which are assembled by humans, in which a series of rules or algorithms are placed on those, which are built by humans, in order to give us a fast, predictive output of what it thinks that we want. And so, therefore, as we have seen, this is how that error can creep in because it's trying to please us. It's trying to give us the information it thinks that we want, not necessarily the information we need at that particular point in time. And so again, this is all human based. And that's one of the things that we stress to the students when we do this algorithmic literacy is that this is all done by humans every step along the way. And we as the human, as the consumer within that, have to be mindful in the same way that when we took a look at Wikipedia way back in the day, we had to be really careful about what is truth because it's really asks us to question what is true and what is verifiable truth within those particular means.
Evan, let's tap into your expertise a little bit and discuss what you're going to be talking about to our upper school students here at
Mhm.
Kincaid, I believe, during your visit next week.
Sure. So, I think it makes sense to say from the very beginning that talking to the upper school students about this is not designed to alarm or to sensationalize. And certainly, we're trying to go about this in a way that feels measured and clear-eyed and age appropriate. But I think it's important as they sort of navigate the world online and sort of this part of their lives that they have a foundational baseline understanding of what deepfakes are, some of the ways in which it can show up, some of the dangers of using deepfakes to abuse another student, to bully another student. This is not a prank or a joke. It's really important that they understand that. The laws have changed on this, not only here in Texas, but nationally. And so the
Evan, I'm sorry. Do you mind if I interrupt you? I want to go back a few years when I first heard the word deep fake,
Yeah.
and a lot of our listeners might be saying,
What's
"You guys are saying a deep fake."
Yeah.
Before we maybe get into both the use of it and the consequences, can you give us a deep fake 101? What is a deep fake?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you kind of put us in reverse a little bit for
Sorry.
that. So no, that's important. So former English teacher, so obligated to tell you that deepfake is a portmanteau of deep learning and fake. Basically, they are. Now, the next question is, what exactly is a portmanteau?
That was
Yeah,
okay.
so deepfakes they come in a couple different forms. So they can be videos, they can be images, they could be something called vocal clones, where someone can take a sample of your voice, feed it into those algorithms that Vinny was talking about, and it can then reproduce your voice actually off of a pretty small sample size, something as small as your outgoing voicemail message, just 5 seconds. So if your audience wants homework, I would remove that voice from your outgoing voicemail session, outgoing voicemail. And so it can come in a couple different forms, and the realism of these deepfakes has been improving at kind of an exponential rate. And so, whereas a couple of years ago, these deepfakes often looked kind of cartoonish, increasingly the line between what is real and what is fake is getting blurrier. We're seeing this show up as a new kind of scam. You think you're getting a call from a loved one who's maybe been in an accident or something's happened, but they are trying to take your money or have you change your password. They're trying to put you in sort of an emotional state. So one of the things I would suggest to families and to schools is to maybe have a code word that's only known by the people in your family so that you know for a fact you're talking to who you think you're talking to. This is unfortunately become increasingly common. Companies have gotten scammed out of hundreds of millions of dollars in the last year alone using these types of scams. So schools have to take this seriously from a policy standpoint, a sort of incident response standpoint, and a preventative standpoint, engaging with all the major stakeholder groups, parents, staff, students. And I'm very excited to say that's exactly what Kincaid is doing.
Uh, I'd like to connect a little bit of what you talked about when describing what a deep fake is, and maybe hone in on the use of imagery without a student or a child's permission.
Yeah, so this is the darkest part of my work, but it's unfortunately a reality that schools all over the country have to grapple with. Even excellent schools with great cultures, full of kids who really care about one another, have to treat this as a question of when and not a question of if. And basically, what we're seeing is kids using this deepfake technology to create, without the other student's permission, an intimate image of them, of their body, without their permission, and sharing it amongst their friend group. In many cases, the students who engage in this think, oh, it was a prank, it was a joke, not understanding this has really, really serious ramifications for that student who's targeted socially, emotionally, their reputation, the academic fallout. It turns a kid's life upside down. High school is hard enough without having someone make images like this of you. And the other piece of this is that in most cases, parents, kids, they're not aware that if you engage in something like this and create those types of images, you have committed a felony. And we're now talking about a digital crime scene. And you will face not only in school consequences, but legal consequences as well that are very, very serious. And so we owe it to students to make sure they understand what this is, why it's so dangerous, and what to do if they or someone they care about is targeted.
Are there one or two things that are happening maybe that parents could look up and do a little research on their own to see what tools may be out there that the government's trying to provide?
Absolutely. So I'll just quickly mention the Take It Down Act, which passed last spring with overwhelming support. Like in this political environment, you couldn't get puppy dogs and ice cream to pass by that margin. People are pretty much in unanimous agreement. This was really, really important. The biggest part of the Take It Down Act, beyond making it a federal crime to publish or threaten to publish these sort of intimate images, either real or deepfake, was that it gave a lot more power to victims to reach out to these social media platforms where these images potentially get posted, and basically have like a takedown order where within 48 hours, the social media site has to comply. And they're now putting in kind of portals that allow you to contact them. And by May, all of these different platforms will have these portals in place. It gives a lot more recourse to a victim who, even just a year ago, was in a position of trying to contact Instagram or Snapchat on their own. You're like 14 and you're in crisis. How are you supposed to do that? So that's a really, really big deal. And then in Texas, it's against the law not just to publish or threaten to publish, but just the act of creating one of these images is against the law here in Texas. So this is a serious issue anywhere in the country, but it is very serious here in Texas.
Vinny, let's swing back over to you and talk about Kincaid and maybe the connection to what Evan is saying of how can we as a school are the things we can do and things we have been doing to help protect our students, to protect our parents, and help them navigate through some of these murky waters.
Evan's talking about an extreme, and a lot of the deep fakes don't necessarily have to go to the extreme in order to be bad, right? By simply matching up voice to an image to misrepresent who and what you are, right? Which is at the core of Kincaid's belonging, right? We really want to focus on the individual can be damaging to a reputation. And so that reputational damage can be equally as bad as the really bad deep fakes where we go on into areas. And so one of the things that we've done is we've really taken a proactive approach here at Kincaid. We've really focused on the education and making sure that our students and adults understand about what deepfakes are. And so last year in the upper school, there was an assembly about deepfakes. Evan is coming in as a follow up to that. He will also be meeting with our middle school students also this winter to really reinforce a lot of what we have been sharing in the classroom with students at this particular point in time. So you need to understand this. Again, our primary focus is on education, right? Understanding how the tools work, what the purpose of using the tools are, whether it's for good or for bad. If it's for good, I think that we can continue to move forward with that, so that they are not easily deceived, and also so that they have awareness if something were to happen to them.
I know you have been reaching out beyond the sort of the walls of Kincaid to our parents and our community with some messaging and explanations of policies and what we do here at Kincaid to try to put up some protection and some guardrails for our students. Can you share a little bit about that?
Absolutely, I can. So, again, under this guise of digital wellness, it was 2 years ago at this particular point in time when we began our handbook policy reviews that one of the areas that I was really, really wanting to make sure got into our handbook was consent for the use of image, video, audio, so that name, image, likeness for members of our community, that someone couldn't co-opt that, use it without their permission, and begin to build into the handbook policies steps to remediate if someone did use it without that particular consent, um, in that particular guise. And so, we've really established those great policy, a good policy. I wouldn't say it's a great policy, because with the passage of the law, we upped it so that it would include that threat of making the deep fake and to those particular policies. But we've been really conscious and really trying to protect the student as well as adults within the community who can also be victims of this particular area. We've made sure that we communicate this as best we can to parents so that they understand what it is that we're trying to do. And again, as part of that, to provide the instructions on what to do should their students or become a victim of this particular offense.
Evan, what other tools and protections are schools taking to try to keep their students safe?
Sure. So I think the most common reaction to all of this is just sort of a sense of feeling overwhelmed because unfortunately, deepfakes are not a single risk. We're talking about a dozen different things that affect the operations of the school, reputations of everybody in the school community, the institution itself. We're talking about this as a safety issue. I mean, it comes in so many forms that it can be really difficult to kind of get your arms around. And so part of the way that I try to kind of simplify that for schools is to just say, okay, we're going to really just focus on your policies, your incident response. How do you kind of get crisis ready for this? And then what does it look like to engage with these different stakeholder groups? And I tend to find that kind of lowers the blood pressure a little bit. But I will say, compared to Kincaid, I'm not just saying this because I'm on Kincaid's campus, it's really true. You're not going to find other independent schools that already have a deepfake policy. Like, for the most part, I can't think of a single school I've worked with that already had some of these pieces in place. It's just really uncommon. So for most of them, they're starting at square one. And so being able to leverage a bit of a culture where there's already a culture of thinking critically about AI and questioning, where the conversation between the connection between honesty and AI is already, that's a snowball that's already been rolling. Those pieces really matter. It makes my work a lot easier. And so, someone might think, oh, well, Kincaid has really bought in on AI and therefore puts them at higher risk. It's actually just the opposite. You all are much better positioned to deal with this sort of new emerging set of risks because you've done this legwork for years now.
We are lucky we get to spend all day with kids. It's not the school that many of our parents remember in their classrooms. And so it's essential for us to partner with the board, with the risk committee of the board, with our parents, so that they understand what these capabilities are. They understand what the changes are. They understand what the risks are, what the potential is, what the potential good is. We've been really focused this year, especially with the advance and the growth of our Center for STEM and Laura Cross, to make sure that we've been very intentional in terms of continuing to communicate with parents. Back in October, Laura and I hosted a parent session in about AI and how we're using AI, and we recorded it. We have the resources. Included in those resources are how parents can begin to partner and how they can begin to talk to their students about the student use of AI at home. This is an evolving technology, right? And it's hard to keep up, and the pace of change is just been accelerating more and more. None of us has the answers, but if we work together and share information, we're all going to be able to help our students be in the strongest position to really leverage this technology for what it's capable of, but also be able to provide a safety net for them should they stumble. And as the parent of two adult children, they will stumble as they go along their journey.
Wow, well said, Vinny. Um, Evan, as we start to bring this to a close, could you point us to maybe one or two specific sources of information besides our Falcon Flyer where parents can get up to speed on what is happening with deepfakes and AI technology?
I mean, I would just say that, it can be tricky for parents to teach this if they don't feel like they fully understand it themselves. And so part of what I would suggest to parents is kind of getting your own digital house in order a little bit, being more discriminating about the kind of content you post, enabling two-factor authentication, checking your privacy settings on social media, those types of things, so that when you sit down with your child, you're speaking from experience, and you're not lecturing, you are sort of setting an example. I think all of those are good ideas. Um, I'll say, it's sad to me, but it's become a pattern. I've talked now to over a dozen teenagers who have been victimized by deepfake abuse. And without exception, every single one of them, the number one emotion that they felt after being victimized was shame. And that's especially sad because they have done nothing wrong. They are the victim of a crime. But in that moment of feeling shame, it's really important to them that they have a trusted adult in their life they know they can go to. And so you want to be that trusted adult who can say, hey, listen, this is not your fault. You are the victim of a crime, and we're going to work together to alert authorities if needed, if that's the type of case it is. And that you're informed that they have rights to get these images taken down off the internet. And that you also sort of know what to do. You're going to save these messages and screenshots instead of deleting them, because that can often be really important in helping stop the spread and working with law enforcement if that's the sort of case it is. But just really important that your child knows that you are informed on this, that you're a safe space. And the very, very last thing I'll say is that we do want to do some deterrence here as well, which is to say to our students, this is not a joke. It's not a prank. The consequences are really serious for you, and the consequences are really serious for anyone you're creating deep fakes of. And so we're trying to make this less likely that it happens in this community. And so you're going to be an important voice on that front as well.
Evan and Vinny, thanks again for sharing the information. It was really good to have you on the Perch. Evan, thanks for coming in.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you for your time, Mike.
All right, the Perch will return again in 2 weeks with new conversations and stories about education, leadership, and community. Be sure to follow the Kincaid School on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And the Perch is now available on Apple and Spotify podcast platforms as well. Finally, check out Kincaid's website and read the aforementioned Falcon Flyer for more information on how Kincaid supports our students and our community throughout the year. Thanks again for joining us on the Perch.